Today, I'm going to be showing you how I took this boring spectrogram and transformed it into a masterpiece. So, long ago, I was looking through plugins on FL Studio, and I found this, the spectrogram, audio turned into an image. The more I thought of it, the more impossible it seemed. It was like bridging the gap between two irreconcilable things. What sort of insane technology was required to do such a thing? Well, fast forward to last year, and I was kind of concerned about how little could be done with spectrograms. They were useful for analyzing sound, and not much more than that. I was really hoping for any sort of plugin that would let me edit a spectrogram. So, I decided to make one myself. However, I realized that I wasn't as genius as I thought I was. So, I asked ChatGPT to make me a spectrogram. It wrote me this crazy code that generated the spectrogram. And after some research, I found out that it was called the fast Fourier transform, which basically transforms a sound wave into its frequencies. I noticed that I could change the quality of the spectrogram to make it render slower or faster, so I added those as an option. Also, I made sure that the spectrogram was rendered live, so it wouldn't be boring like staring at a progress bar. It was looking great. I could render entire songs onto 4K spectrograms. However, everything was all bunched up at the bottom. This is because sound frequencies double for every octave, so the higher notes would take up a lot more frequencies than the lower notes. So, I added an option to scale the spectrogram more evenly. Now that I had the spectrogram part down, it was time to add the interactive part. A brush with adjustable brightness and size. Here was my plan. The brush would change the volume of whatever it drew on the spectrogram. Then, the updated spectrogram would be turned into audio. Finally, the audio would be rendered back onto the spectrogram. But for some unexplainable reason, the spectrogram would keep on getting more and more distorted with each cycle. I could make 10 brush strokes, and the entire original song would be completely gone. After even more research, I was able to fix the issue. The short explanation, I made the spectrogram colorful. The long explanation, phase. It turns out that because I used the fast Fourier transform to generate the spectrogram, simply changing the volume wasn't enough. Each pixel also required another value, the phase. This is basically the offset of each frequency wave in the spectrogram. When phases are aligned in a specific way, it can cause deconstructive interference, which greatly affects the sound. And my program was assigning all phases to 0, causing lots of deconstructive interference and distortion. So, I added phase data to the spectrogram and displayed it using hue. I can now draw on the spectrogram without ruining the sound. Now that I had achieved the first goal of making the spectrogram interactive, my new goal was to make it a complete paint software. I'm talking Microsoft Paint, but for sound. This meant 5 things. A wide variety of tools and brushes, adjustable zoom, undo and redo, a beautiful GUI, and many awesome utilities. Firstly, I upgraded the band scale by making it fully adjustable, going anywhere from linear to fully logarithmic and scaled to the notes. I also added a timeline and a y-axis and made both scrollable. Getting the y-axis right was a challenge because y-scrolling wasn't linear and had to follow the adjustable log scale. But after lots of extremely difficult math, I got it to work. Next, I added new tools, including the rectangle, line, eraser, brush, amplifier, and image overlay. The image overlay was cool because it allowed you to turn images into sound. You could even preserve the color of the image through changing the phase. The blur tool would average the frequencies and times together, making it sound lower quality and more distorted. The amplifier would multiply the volume. The rectangle was useful for creating blocks of static noise, and the line tool was useful for making slide and whistle sound effects. Afterwards, I created an undo/redo system. After each time you draw something, it would save a snapshot of all the changed columns, and clicking undo and redo would switch between these snapshots. Then I decided to improve the GUI because it currently sucked. I added a top bar with all the tools and a side panel with all the options. This layout was inspired by Shopify's editor. Shopify also left some buttons on the left to switch to other panels. So I decided to add a piano and an equalizer panel. The piano panel included tools that helped with drawing notes, making it like FL Studio's piano roll, but a lot cooler. And I also added a MIDI export feature that converted the spectrogram into a MIDI file, which you could open up on MuseScore and play it like a piano. Now, I looked through several other sound to MIDI converters, but they were all trash. I thought I could do better than them. But it turns out, making an accurate sound to MIDI converter is extremely difficult. So, I asked my friend ChatGPT, and it recommended that I use an AI model. I decided on basic pitch, which was free and lightweight. After headbanging for several days, I got it to fully work on my spectrogram. Now, I just had to wait and see if it would do any better than my code. And it actually did. Though it was clearly far from perfect, it was definitely a lot more accurate. In the equalizer panel, I added a sideways equalizer. I had to make it update independently from the spectrogram because otherwise, changing anything on the equalizer would require the spectrogram to be redrawn, which is laggy as heck. I also decided to add another tool, the noise remover. Now, I didn't really feel like adding a complicated noise remover algorithm, so I simply made it erase all the pixels below a certain volume. It wasn't perfect at removing noise, but it was good enough. However, there was still one massive issue with my spectrogram. Everything I drew sounded like a bunch of loud static. This was because the brush applied random phases, which creates random noise. So I experimented with other phases and came up with two new phase textures, harmonics and flat. The harmonics texture would create this robotic-like sound, and the flat texture would paint a constant phase, causing phase interference and creating a blank sound. Later, I added 10 more phase textures, including frame impulse, chirp, and reference frame. These phase textures allowed the brush to create a variety of sounds other than static. If you thought my improved spectrogram was cool, I made it available online. I even added a fancy website for it. It's called spectrodraw.com. Go check it out. This took forever. Let me know what you think in the comments, or leave a review because I spent a whole week coding that. Anyways, I'll be making more music soon, so peace!